So I guess next, if you all wanted to talk about some of the issues that you see with the existing schooling system and how alternative models can improve those issues, I guess would be a starting point that everybody's interested in.
One of the things that I think is at the core of it is the curriculum. I call it the tyranny of content. There is a curriculum, I don't know about in England, but certainly in the United States, that is absolutely filled with endless facts and concepts that most people, including PhDs, never need to know. Fifth graders in the United States, thanks to the Common Core, are needed to understand the area of a parabola, quadratic equations, things like that. And while in theory, understanding the cause of the Peloponnesian War has value and could be generalized to really understanding human nature, that's not in the real world how it occurs. So this tyranny of content keeps kids from developing what are the primary important skills, which is communication skills in an ethical way, the ability to critically think and analyze arguments, the ability to reason mathematically and estimate and do probability, statistics. And so I think the core problem are two things. One is the tyranny of content instead of the prioritization of what really matters, what is going to do the most good for the most people, and frankly, our abandonment of ability group classes.
You know, what you're saying is absolutely right, but I'm going to go further than that, further back than that, and say that, you know, the whole school system is based on a completely archaic system. I mean, it's actually a babysitting service, let's face it. A lot of the reason children go to school is because parents need to go out to work and they don't know what to do with their children, and that's kind of where things began. And they began from trying to teach the children the basic stuff. I think one of the problems that all the schools models is that looking at education as a whole, they've never looked at actually how children learn best. And I think the places that you see things like that are places like Summerhill and Subdury Valley and many other free schools that are there, which show how children, given the freedom to make choices, follow a natural tendency.
The current educational system really came out of the Protestant Revolution, primarily in Prussia. It was the Prussians who developed the school that we know today, and their very explicit purpose was to drive the free will out of children. Their very explicit purpose was to teach obedience and to indoctrinate children, to teach reading so that they could read the Bible. There was never any concept that the purpose of education was free thinking, critical thinking, curiosity, initiative. It was quite the opposite. It was to drive those things out of children. And if you look at the early writings about schools, that's what the purpose was. Today, many people in education are looking for something different from that in education. We want to promote entrepreneurship. We want to promote curiosity. We want to promote initiative. We live in a world where the robots are doing the routine work, where the computers are answering the questions that are already answered. We need creative people. We need innovators. And the schools were designed to produce the exact opposite. They're incapable of producing the kind of qualities that we are looking for. Children are born curious. They are born playful. They are born with the drive to take charge of their own education, and we drive that out of them when we send them to coercive top-down schools. I have seen over and over and over again, and I've conducted follow-up studies of children at the Subdury Valley School where there essentially are no classes. Kids are playing and exploring all day long, and they're becoming educated. The school hasn't been in existence nearly as long as Summerhill, but it's been in existence almost half a century. It's got hundreds and hundreds of graduates out there in the real world doing real things who became educated in a manner that they controlled. They go out in the world knowing how to take charge of their own life, knowing how to take responsibility for themselves. Unlike the great majority of people leaving our standard schools, there's no question in my mind whatsoever but what children, no matter what their personality is, unless they have very severe brain damage of some sort, are very capable of taking charge of their own education. And when we deprive them of that, we are taking away much of their humanity.
You know, the world is hungering for authoritative data on a program that would close the achievement gap. If in fact it was a scalable, measurable difference in critical thinking or empathy or whatever, why at this point would there not be good data? And we're still talking about, there's some preliminary observations that it appears that.
There's not good data because the world doesn't accept this. You know, even today, Subdury Valley's been around for 50 years. Summerhill's been around much longer than that. You know, these are not experiments anymore, but yet the world is not accepting of them. The world doesn't really look at them. The world doesn't, you know, everybody is hearing so much propaganda in the other direction. There are so many vested interests for maintaining the status quo within education. There are almost no professors of education who have the slightest interest in Summerhill or Sudbury Valley School. They don't look into it. It's a different language from what they taught. Once you no longer are talking about curriculum, once you are no longer talking about top-down education, there's no longer a role for schools of education, no longer a role for teachers as we traditionally think of teachers, no longer a role for textbooks as we think of textbooks. All of these vested interests for the status quo would be turned over by something like Sudbury Valley or Summerhill if we went to that model. So the social and economic forces against this kind of change are enormous. Yet I think the change is going to occur. I think it's probably occurring now in the United States by virtue of more and more people dropping out of standard schooling for homeschooling and more for self-directed homeschooling. This is an accelerating curve of change.
So what do you say to the parents, or there is not so much unemployment but underemployment, where employers, in order to make a living, of course I want a peaceful, loving, good, not bullying human beings who enjoy life. It sounds like the Waldorf schools here in America. But what do you say to the parents who are worried about somebody saying, my kid is going to be unable to be happy and well-adjusted if he's living homeless because he can't make a living because the employers are requiring all these computer skills and high-level reasoning skills and mathematical skills, and the universities won't take him? What do you say to those parents?
Well, I mean, those parents don't actually apply to a school like Summerhill anyway, because they have different desires and standards for their children. But the reality is, that's why we're a school, because that's why we're not a utopian community, because we are filling that balance. We're giving the kids the education that they need, but we're giving it to them in the most comfortable and enjoyable way that we possibly can, and giving them the freedom to make their own choices, to learn about responsibility, and to be interested in their learning and remain so. So I'm not saying our kids aren't achieving those things. They are, but they're doing it in a different way around. They're doing it and still having a great childhood as well.
I'd like to address that question too. I've conducted follow-up studies of graduates of the Sudbury Valley School. The school itself has conducted some further follow-up studies more recently. I've also just recently published my study of grown unschoolers, children who are who direct their own education in a home-based manner, and they're remarkably well employed. And as far as I can see, regardless of their background, they come from a fairly wide background. Some of them came to the school troubled in many ways. They were not the cream of the crop in public school, and they've gone on to excellent careers, including in technology, including in the sciences, including one of the graduates in my initial study is a professor of mathematics. There are doctors, there are lawyers, there are scientists of all sorts, as well as, not surprisingly, many very successful artists. One of the graduates of Sudbury Valley recently won the Academy Award for Best Documentary. We can point to many great successes who are self-educated people. One of the things that's come out of both my studies of Sudbury Valley graduates and home-based unschoolers is that very often in their play and in their pursuit of their own interests, young people develop a real passion for something, and then they become very good at that.
Yeah.
acquire the skills and knowledge to then pursue that as a career. A remarkably large number in my research, when I asked them, what were you playing? I asked them first, what is your career? And then I asked them, were you playing at? What were the things that interested you? Very often there was a very direct relationship. You know, the wonderful thing about our world today, as difficult as it is in many ways, and I agree with Zoe, we've got to get rid of war. I agree with you, there are employment problems, but one of the things we have to say is there's a lot of ways of making a living in our world if you're good at it, if you really want to do it, and if you have the self-discipline it takes. One of the primary characteristics that comes out of pursuing self-directed education is self-discipline. You learn how to take control of your own life because somebody else isn't controlling it for you.
Would you talk a little bit about unschooling as how it's best practiced outside of a Sudbury school?
Yeah, I initially was somewhat skeptical of unschooling outside of a school because where does the rich environment come from? How do you make contact with other children and so on and so forth? I think what's happening more and more as there are more unschoolers is they are developing communities amongst themselves, they're developing learning centers and so on.
About 80% of those Teach for America people leave within the first year, and of all teachers in America, no cherry picking, depending on the study, between 30 and 45% of teachers leave within the first 3 years.
But isn't that partly because well, certainly in this country, they say, I didn't want to be a policeman, I wanted to be a teacher. Yep. And in many cases, because there are so many kids who don't want to be in school and don't want to be doing that subject, you spend half your time telling everybody to sit down and shut up and listen. I think one of the first directions they can take will be to start dividing classes. Still within the system they have, first of all, removing the expectations of achievement, and then also to start allowing children to stream into classes that they are interested in, and at least that way, if you have a whole lot of kids in woodwork who've chosen to go in that direction, they're more likely to be attentive. So those are simple things that could actually be applied to mainstream schooling quite easily without all the freedom and the stuff that we're talking about, not all this really avant-garde, terrible stuff of allowing kids to make choices, but just a little bit, just allowing children to go in some direction so the teachers don't have to actually be policemen to keep them quiet. I mean, I think that mainstream schools do not have a broad and balanced curriculum, and the reason they don't have a broad and balanced curriculum is because they miss the most important part, which is allowing the child to develop as a human being. And you can't teach that. So you're saying, what other things would in this ideal school would you teach? You don't teach. That's the whole point. You let them learn and be who they are. And that's why I think that the kind of education we offer, and schools like the Sudbury schools and many, many other schools, there's many schools in Israel and all over the world that are following these different, and the unschooling as well, I will include in that really. It's about allowing people to grow naturally, and that to me is the most important part of the curriculum. And from that, feeling good about yourself. I mean, let's remember that mainstream schools spend most of their time making most of their pupils feel as if they're failures, because there are only some who find it really easy. There are some who sit there and think, yeah, I can do this, and they go on and they fly and they take all their exams and they get high grades and everything's fine. But for the rest of all those people, they're learning every day, I'm a failure. I'm finding this really hard. I'm sitting next to somebody and they're doing it better and I'm doing it badly. So the most important thing about allowing people to make their own choices and to grow as people is the first thing they're learning is I'm a successful person. I'm good at life. I enjoy life. I feel good about myself. And from there, you learn learning doesn't stop when you're 16 or 17. It doesn't stop. I'm nearly 70 and I'm still learning and loving it. So the whole point is that regarding jobs and qualifications and everything, you can change your mind midstream. You can suddenly decide when you're 40, I want to be a vet, and you can train to be a vet and you can do it. But you need to have a lot of self-confidence to do that. And so I think that the main part of the curriculum needs to be that freedom, that allowing people to grow and feel really confident and happy with who they are.
I don't agree that person who gets all A's and flies through school is well off. I think that
No, I 100% agree with you. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that at all.
I have known too many honors students who've gone on, and then at some point in their life, they say, "I never figured out who I am, what I really want to do. I've just been working for these false tokens my whole life. Here I am, a lawyer. I would be better off for a stranger." You know,
No, I agree with you 100%. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Here's the whole. I knew you would agree with me. Here's the whole point of self-directed education, which is, I think Zoe stated very well. It's wrong for people to decide for somebody else what they should learn. That's especially true today. There's so much knowledge. There's so much out there in the world. Nobody can learn all of it, right? Why force everybody to learn the same little slice of it? Let's let people go in the directions they want to go in. Let's let people find their passions. Let's let people develop whatever their interest is. That's the whole point of self-directed education. Childhood and adolescence should be a time of learning who you are and how you fit into the world around you. We prevent that from happening in our standard schools, in our society in general, because we keep children so busy doing what we tell them to do that they don't have the time to explore who they are, what their passions are.
The weak students, the B and C students that we send to college now drop out at incredible rates, incurring huge amounts of student loan with the cost of college going crazy. And for them, other alternatives make sense. And again, one size does not fit all. But options include things like, should they work at the elbow of an ethical entrepreneur or master craftsman? Should they volunteer to work at a nonprofit to learn the skills on the job? Should they start their own simple little business or website or whatever? They'll learn more about business from their failing in that first business than they could from all the theoretical business courses they would learn at the university. There are many options that are viewed as inferior in today's era of everybody should go to college. And so the message is, one size does not fit all. Really look at your child. Don't worry so much about what your peers are doing, what the other kids in high school are doing. Ask yourself as a parent and ask the child to look inward and dispassionately look at what is going to really help that kid to develop as a human being and as an employable person.